think that many people are suffering from this, and they're going from doctor to doctor. They don't have bowel movements, they can't fall asleep, because when your brain, who's kind of directing everything, is inflamed, then all the systems coming down from that can be affected.
Welcome to the JJ Virgin Lifestyle Show with celebrity nutrition expert, fitness Hall of Famer, and 4-time New York Times bestselling author, JJ Virgin. JJ is a warrior mom whose knowledge and expertise have helped change hundreds of thousands of lives with over 3.5 million podcast downloads and appearances on Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, The Today Show, Rachel Ray, Larry King Live.
Whoa. This show is about you, not about me. I want to help you find practical, real-world ways to dial in your health and mindset so you can finally lose that weight and feel strong and energized. Stop settling for less than your personal best. It's time to find out how to look and feel better than ever. And I'll be right here with you the whole way.
Hey, it's JJ here. And if you've ever walked from, say, your kitchen into your bedroom, and then you can't remember why you walked in there, or you got to the car and you realized you left the stuff you needed in the house, that brain foggy stuff, or you feel like your memory's not quite up to speed, this show today is for you. But it also could be even if you've got like mood changes or some hormonal stuff going on. Turns out that you could be suffering from something called neuroinflammation or leaky brain or glial priming. I know these are big words and stuff that we don't talk about very much, but basically, if you have an inflamed brain, and you can have a leaky brain just like leaky gut, it can be creating a whole lot of symptoms. And what's cool is that you can do something about it. Today's guest, we've had on the show before. Her name is Brigit Danner. She's been on the show before talking about toxicity. And she actually got into this topic because she was looking for more information about mold toxicity, because she had spent years recovering from mold toxicity and what it did for her brain. And then she found this, and now she's a bit obsessed. So you're going to hear a cool interview, because this is really the first time she's out sharing and talking about it. We're her first. And let me tell you a little bit about her before we dive in. She's a licensed acupuncturist. She's been a licensed acupuncturist since 2004. She's also a functional diagnostic practitioner. And she's given over 12,000 acupuncture treatments in her career. And she's really been obsessed since she was a little girl. She has been obsessed with protecting the environment. When she was a little girl, she was donating her allowance to Greenpeace. Now she's running a busy integrative wellness practice in Portland, Oregon. But while doing that, she developed an environmental illness and from toxic mold. And when that happened, she went and had to take charge of her health. Actually, that was before. She's moved now from Oregon, but she was running the practice, got toxic mold, really lost everything, and then moved to Arizona so she could heal. So this whole new topic came from digging deeper into what was going on, which is super cool. And you're going to be able to get her ebook, Is Your Brain Inflamed? At jjvirgin.com/inflamed brain. So make sure that you grab that as well. And before we dive in, I want to give a shout out to Don Jack 25, who gave a 5-star review. And Don Jack says, I love the podcast, but lately, last few have been super long and I know very informative, but I find I'm not having as much time to listen as I used to, and they used to fit nicely into my commute. Okay, so here's the deal with that. I had a bunch of people write in and say, we want longer podcasts. Oh my gosh. So I'm doing kind of a variety. In that we're getting ready to get into season 2. And as you're listening, this might actually already be season 2 after years. And what we're doing is interviews. We're doing our interviews. And if there's really cool stuff going on, I might go a little longer. Then, so we do once a week interview, once a week with me. Those will be a little shorter. Again, like those bite-sized ones you're used to, where they're more around 20 to 25 minutes. The interviews probably are going to be more around 25 to 30. Some might even go to 35. And then Friday Q&A. And those will be short, 5 to 10 minutes. So something for everybody. Okie dokie. Now, before we dive in, I want to share another favorite with you. Bridgit Danner, welcome to the show. Glad to have you back.
Thanks, JJ. Happy to be here.
So we are talking about something that we actually haven't really talked about on the show before. And when we had you on before, you were talking all about toxicity. Now we're going to be talking about neuroinflammation and glial priming. I will tell you, not only have we not talked about that, I don't even know what the heck it is. So first off, how did you get into this?
Yeah, so I recently took this course on neuroinflammation, basically based on my own past history of mold toxicity and knowing how much it affects my brain and, clients who come to me. So I was like, well, maybe this will kind of translate over to, to understanding the brain better. And I ended up being so glad I took it, even though the class mostly wasn't about mold. It's about lots of ways the brain becomes inflamed. Just really helped me understand the mechanism as the brain as an organ. And that when it's inflamed or glial primed, as we'll learn about, it just dysregulates so many different things in the body, from gut health to weight management to mood. So it's just an area that I don't think is understood that much. We hear a little bit about grain brain, perhaps. There's getting to be more awareness about head injuries, but I think there's still a real lack of information about inflammation of the brain.
Well, I would chime in on that for sure, because, it's like, I remember with Grant and his severe traumatic brain injury, they're like, it just takes time, nothing you can do. I'm like, come on, that couldn't possibly be right. But do you think some of it's because, how are you going to test for brain inflammation?
It is a little tough. Yeah, I did. There are some ways to test, but they're kind of indirect at times. And like if you run an MRI, and the conventional medical world may say, oh, you have some like little variations in your white matter, but that's normal or that's part of aging. But that could be affecting your brain performance in ways that affect you. Yeah, and there's this thing called glial priming, which may still be happening for your son. So your brain is only partly neurons, and then the majority of it is these glial cells that don't get any credit, and I didn't know much about before I took this, but they're kind of like helper cells in the brain. They help for communication and cleaning up waste products in the brain, that kind of thing. So those cells are super important helpers to the brain. And when they become damaged, their shape can change, and that could be permanent. But there are some ways to improve it. But basically, when they become changed from a trauma, anytime there's a new trauma, could be another head injury, or it could just be stress, could be not getting enough sleep. Those cells will react sooner and change the way your brain is responding quicker than a person with a healthy brain. So I don't know if your son experiences this or not, but is he sensitive to like new stimuli or changes that affect him more than other people?
Yes.
Okay.
Hugely. Yeah. I mean, we've had to tightly control his environment, how much stimulation he can have, how many people he can be around, how much noise there is, how many new things, any kind of time pressure, all of the above.
Exactly. And your son was in a really, tragic, huge accident, but some of us were in just smaller accidents over time. I know you were an athlete when you were younger. Did you ever have a head injury, even just a small one?
It's so interesting when you really sit down and ask people, have you ever, because I think people think that you have a head injury when you have something happen, like what happened with my son when he was hit by a car and basically like left for dead in the street and had a severe traumatic brain injury. And people think, oh yeah, he had a brain injury, but they don't realize that there's so many things that we do. And Dr. Amen said it, it's like, if you hit your head, you hurt your brain. So, I mean, who hasn't hit their head? Who hasn't hit their head? Like, I think back just to when my kids were little and they did that, that horrible head bump thing where they go back at you as hard as possible.
Oh my God.
I mean, not on purpose, but they're hitting their brain and they're hitting my brain. But that, and along with, I had a car accident where I was not only hit head on the freeway, ask me
Oh,
how that
wow.
happened. I was rear-ended too, hit head on. And then I had another one where I was on a piece of weight equipment that broke and flew me forward
Oh
and
my
slammed my
gosh.
head against a bar. I mean, like, and so,
Oh,
but we all have those things. So, like, how could you get through life without, hitting your head? And but I think the big question here, Bridget, is how the heck do you know? Like, is it just more looking at the symptoms? How do you know if this is an issue for you?
yeah. I mean, you can look at symptoms. I can describe some of them, but there are some tests that you can run to know more. I would just say, again, like even with your son and his big injury, they didn't really explain to you how the brain was impacted. So I wouldn't say listen to this and then go to your family care and expect them to run a bunch of tests to let you know if your brain is inflamed. There are some blood test markers that can test for like inflammation and kind of like waste matter that could suggest that there's inflammation in the brain. There are specific kind of specialty labs that can test for a leaky brain, a leaky blood-brain barrier. There are tests that we run for leaky gut, which often correlates to leaky brain. So then there's some other things about testing for oxygen. There's kind of a long list, but I would just say if you do want to get testing, go to a specialist. There are functional neurologists out there who've been trained to do it. Again, we do some of the testing and will likely offer more. I'm really interested in the blood-brain barrier testing. Tests for brain autoimmunity are also helpful. Because everybody has a different picture, right? Like there's the head injury, and then there's other ways the brain can come inflamed if it was already leaky, and then there was a big infection that was
Okay,
allowed
now
to pass through.
stop.
Sure, too much.
No. I'm just going to bring this into like easy understandable because you've said leaky brain, leaky brain, leaky brain. And we did have, I'm trying to remember who I just had on where we talked about leaky brain. I think it's fascinating now that just like we have gut permeability, which everyone on the show's very familiar with, I would think, because it's what the Virgin Diet really was talking about with food intolerance. You have your gut becomes more permeable, things get into circulation that shouldn't, they create an immune attack, they create inflammation. Let's talk about leaky brain because that's a newer idea that's just coming out, and how you know if you have that or what are the symptoms and what can cause it and what it creates.
Yeah, so it's similar to leaky gut. The brain should be kind of protected by a barrier that is kind of tightly bound so that certain things don't get in, but that can become leaky as well, first from the gut becoming leaky or from a sudden head injury. The brain and the gut have that close connection. So, sometimes when there's a leaky gut, there is a leaky brain as well. I don't think it's maybe every single time, but it could happen all at once with some insult, or it could happen maybe more slowly if the gut was leaky first. But then inflammatory components can access the brain, easier. So things like gluten and dairy that irritate your gut can also irritate your brain. So much also alcohol. So, alcohol affects the brain. That's sort of a benefit of it in some way, right? It makes us feel good.
It's like, really? It
does? That's what it's doing is it's intoxicating the brain. But if you have a leaky brain barrier, this is another kind of warning sign. If you're very sensitive to alcohol and you get a huge headache and you don't tolerate it, that's the sign that alcohol is really affecting the brain more so, probably because of a leaky blood-brain barrier, and maybe because of glial priming that we haven't talked too much about. Well, we talked a bit about it.
Well, I circled that to come back and go explain glial priming too, because a lot of big words. People are like neural inflammation, glial priming, leaky.
Yeah, like, okay. And I didn't know much about this stuff either. I was very traditionally trained as an acupuncturist, but I think that many people are suffering from this, and they're going from doctor to doctor. They don't have bowel movements, they can't fall asleep, because when your brain, who's kind of directing everything, is inflamed, then all the systems coming down from that can be affected. Your hormones can be affected. Your whole gut pathway can be affected. Your mood can be affected because neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So so yeah, that blood-brain barrier is really important, especially if you've had some kind of past history. Now you've got to be really careful to protect the brain. I've been sensitive to alcohol for many years, and it stinks. But
I was just going to say, yeah, bummer.
If I have one drink, sometimes the next day it feels like I had 6 drinks. So it's just not worth it. And when this was the first time I learned it was in this class on neuroinflammation. So the alcohol really irritates that already inflamed brain. So it just was a big light bulb for me.
So what about glial priming? And then we are gonna talk about what the heck to do about these things, because I don't want to just pull back the kimono and go, oh my gosh, look at these horrible things going on and not have a solution. So let's talk about what glial priming is, and then hopefully you've got some things that people can both help identify this. We've already talked about the type of doctors, because it makes sense. Like, this is very specialized, but the type of doctors to go seek out. We'll add some testing options in so that people can see that. But right now, what I'd love to know is, what is glial priming? And then I'd love to get into what are some of the things we can do about these conditions.
Okay, so we talked about this a bit, but we'll review. So about only 10% of the brain is neurons, which you would think of as brain cells. And the other 90% are these neuroglial cells, which are, again, these supporting cells, giving brain structure, providing those like myelin sheaths, kind of providing immunity, cleaning up the brain. So those often look like a starfish. They have little branches and they can move around the brain. But when there's been a trauma, either a hit or a mini stroke or an infection, they can change shape to become more like an amoeba. And then they're not really doing their job of trimming, cleaning the brain and trimming the brain and immunity and all that stuff they're supposed to be doing. And they become more sensitive to the next insult. So they look like a starfish. Now they look like an amoeba. And if there's a new trauma, like you drink a bunch of alcohol or you don't sleep at night, now they're really, shrinking and kind of stuck and not doing their cells. So that priming is that first insult. And then whatever insult comes next is more reactive, like with your son. And that can just be, stress, eating the wrong thing. And I would say the difference between an inflamed brain and glial priming is the severity of your reaction. So for instance, when I was really sick with mold, if I was re-exposed, I would go into a rage. My eye could be twitching, my muscles could be twitching. I have a friend whose, heart rate goes up exponentially when he's exposed to a new chemical. That's glial priming, that kind of extreme reaction. Maybe you eat gluten and you're like in bed for a week. You can't even function. Whereas neuroinflammation is a little more subtle where, gosh, I ate some gluten. I feel foggy. I have a headache. I don't, that was a mistake type of thing. It's a little bit more subtle. So does that help kind of explain the difference?
Yes. So okay. Now the next big question is, okay, so I'm hearing two different things, and I think they're super important. First of all, that a lot of the things that we do that we know we shouldn't really be doing, right? But that not only do they hurt your gut, maybe they make your joints hurt, but they also hurt your brain. And, yes. Right. And a lot of these symptoms that may be symptoms of, say, food intolerance or some other things also could be symptoms of issues with your brain.
Yes, exactly. That's a great summary.
So now that we have that, what can we do to, first of all, can you fix this? Like, if you have leaky brain, if you have this going on with your glial cells, what can you do to turn it around? And how long does it take to do that?
Mm-hmm. So I think every case is kind of different. Every situation is different, but I'll kind of give some examples. Reestablishing your blood-brain barrier is pretty possible with your diet and with some of the things we're going to talk about. As far as the brain cells, some when they are killed in a trauma or severely damaged, like they won't come back. But others can be improved. So I'll give you an example. I actually had an acupuncture client a long time ago who was rock climbing and hit in the head with a rock. Fell down onto his head. so he lost his vision. It affected that area of the brain. That's never going to come back. That was too much trauma to that area of the brain. But I would give him treatments and stuff. And, he still had inflammation in his brain for sure and excess fluid. And there were things we could do to mediate that process, to support his mood, that kind of a thing. And if you have a more sensitive case, you're like, oh, some things she's describing are me, I'm chronically constipated. I have food sensitivities. I have no libido. Again, that hypothalamus pituitary in your brain can be inflamed, and then you don't make as many hormones. That was also a huge light bulb that went off for me, because my hormones just so flatlined ever since I went through this, and they just weren't coming back. But now it makes sense. So if you have all these symptoms and you're kind of chasing them around, they get better and then they get worse again, or they get worse when you fall off the wagon. I think about these things we're going to talk about for the brain, because especially if you have a more subtle case, I think you could reverse it completely. And if you have, say, you have some kids, you have a kid with ADHD or some behavioral issues, they could come back, I think, a lot by decreasing that inflammation in the brain. So probably it's a matter of vigilance and how well do you stick to the plan. And then all of us are a little different with what supplements we are going to respond to, just depending on chemical pathways that were, damaged or needing support. So one person may really, get a lot better from fish oil or green tea extract, whereas another person's not really feeling it on that. So it does take some experimentation to figure out what works for you, what dosage works for you. Unfortunately, an inflamed brain means you can be really sensitive to supplements, which you may run into JJ, where people B vitamins make me feel crazy. It's why would they do that? Well, now we know. They're just too exciting for an inflamed brain. So sometimes you have to dose really small.
Yeah, I know with Grant, we are super careful about, and here's the other thing, and I think this has been very important, is not only are we super careful about how we dose him, we do one change at a time so that we can actually tell what's going on. So I think that's important too. What about, I know one of the big things that I've convinced my son to do, took a while, was that exercise was so important for his brain and for BDNF. And can you talk about how exercise could help here?
Yeah, and I was introduced to this by Suzanne Bennett, who was a mutual friend of ours, who, when I was really sick, and she's like, exercise. And I'm like, man,
no.
I don't want to. Yeah, I was so tired at the time. Just to give people an example of I get it. I would sometimes go to the gym, just lay on the bench, and then go in the sauna. That's all I could do. I was so sick. But eventually, I pushed myself to do more. And just that circulation you get with exercise is really important for the brain. It's not just the circulation, it's other aspects too. But exercise is really important for the brain. And then kind of challenging yourself. So, if you're barely getting out of bed, maybe you just start with walking or some gentle yoga. We don't want you to, hurt yourself. But we do want you to challenge yourself, because that challenges your brain as well. So just slowly increasing what you can. If you have certain areas of your brain that are affecting things like balance, you may want to do some controlled challenges to your balance. So we don't want to put you in power yoga, but you may want to be in a safe space where you can start to challenge your balance a bit while you exercise. But you have to go slowly, because if you get excited and you're like, look at what I can do, you may really fatigue your brain. So just finding that right amount of exercise. Burst exercise is the favorite exercise of Dr. Karazian, who taught this course, but he also acknowledges not everyone can do that. Or maybe a burst for one person is just some jumping jacks, whereas another person could sprint. So,
right. Well, that's the key thing with high intensity interval training, is that it's totally relative to the person. I've worked with some clients who high intensity interval training was literally, I'd have them stand in front of a chair, don't use their hands. They cross them over their chest, and they get, sit down, stand up, sit down. And that was it. That was burst training. And it's totally fine. It's relative to wherever you're at. I know with Grant, we've incorporated that in, and then balance exercise. And one of the things that Dr. Amen advocates is ping pong.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yes, the big things that I heard both from Dr. Perlmutter, of course, David was really keen on anything with high intensity interval training, big for the brain. And then Daniel, big on any coordination exercise. So ping pong, when Grant first came home, I got a ping pong table, got rid of the dining room table, put the ping pong table there, and that's what I used.
Oh, nice.
Are there
Perfect for like a
what about,
team too.
yes, what about dietary shifts?
Yeah, so there's a lot you can do there too. Some of your listeners may already be doing it, but the starting point is to take out processed grains because they raise your blood sugar. Really, I would say reduce or take out alcohol, take out gluten and dairy, again, for that blood-brain barrier. So that's kind of starting. After that, he recommends doing something like autoimmune paleo diet and then kind of graduating to ketogenic diet. There's lots of research about ketogenic diet benefiting the brain. And then if you can graduate to doing some intermittent fasting, that's great for the brain as well. So again, it has to be really step by step. So your brain uses a ton of sugar when it's fatigued and it's fatigued in neuroinflammation. So if you find yourself, craving sugar, needing to eat often, you may be kind of feeding an inflamed brain, and that's going to be a process to change your diet. So I would say just start out with increasing more fats and fibers and decreasing anything kind of sugary or processed. And then if you're feeling good, look into some of these other diets and doing things more extreme. The fiber is important too because it helps feed the good bacteria in the gut, which heals leaky gut, which then in turn heals leaky brain. So fibers are great. If they make you bloated, you can put them in shakes, or you can do little mini doses of them as well.
Yes, I think one of the things I talk about with fiber is, and I learned this the hard way, Bridget. I did this to my dad. Sorry, Dad. When I was first learning all this, I'm like, Dad, you need to eat more fiber, and kind of took him up overnight, not over time. And had a mad constipated dad. Don't do that. So what I teach people is the average person's getting 5 to 14 grams of fiber in a day. I want you to have 50. I know a lot of people say 35. I'm like, kick it up, but don't kick it up overnight, kick it up over time. So what I love about everything I'm hearing is that and it's amazing how this is the same things that help your heart, the same things that help with stress, the same things that help with leaky gut, the same things that help with inflammation. It's like when you look at a lot of these practices of getting rid of processed food, of checking in with things like gluten and dairy and getting rid of sugar and starting to do more high intensity interval training and getting good sleep. And you look at all these things, you go, oh, all right. When you look at a drug, it has a lot of side effects. When you look at dietary and lifestyle interventions, they have all these side benefits. So it might be you're doing it for leaky brain, but it's also going to help with all of these other things. And you'll probably lose a little bit of weight too.
Yes. Yeah. It is all very similar. And sometimes we need to relate it to our own symptoms and struggles, I think, to be able to do it, or this alcohol thing. I mean, I mostly avoid alcohol because it just makes me feel horrible. But now I'm like, oh, it's really irritating my inflamed brain. It just makes it a little easier for me to say no because I know what it's doing to me.
Yeah, and maybe one day it'll get healed.
And
then you can enjoy some dry farm wine. I was like, no dry farm wine. Oh, no.
I know. And I've talked to them, and I even joined their club at one point because they said, well, it's so clean, but it's not the cleanliness of the wine. It's just the sugar in it, in general. But yeah, I very much do hope I can graduate to that.
All right. So we have a free gift for everybody, and it's your ebook called Is Your Brain Inflamed? 5 Tips for Improved Mental Stamina and Clearer Thinking. Who doesn't want that? Everybody wants it.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, cool. We will put that at jjvirgin.com/inflamed brain. And you'll grab that and then you won't have one. So jjvirgin.com/inflamed brain. And Brigit, thank you so much for sharing all of your awesome info on your new big passion with us. Really
It
great.
is my new big passion. I'm still a little figuring out how to talk about it. And that ebook has, more written down, and I have links to a bunch of supplements that are recommended as well.
Okay, great. That's super helpful too. I know I saw here like magnesium, fish oil, CoQ10, phosphatidylcholine, all things that I had Grant on from the start. So good
You're
to see
very
that.
smart.
Lots of antioxidants. So we will have all of that for you. Again, make sure you grab that at jjvirgin.com/inflamed brain. And after the break, I'm going to share my top action step from today and a challenge so that you can put this into immediate action. So stay with me. So this is where I give you my top tip from today and a little challenge. And this is actually pretty basic stuff. First of all, big thing is to make sure you grab the ebook, jjvirgin.com/inflamed brain. And I also wanted to just give you this to think about. It's more a question to ponder today. And one of the things I love that Bridget brought up is that a lot of these symptoms that you are having, if you're doing things to improve your symptoms, which hopefully we don't really kind of just do things to improve symptoms. We see symptoms as a way to to figure out something's going on and then go for the underlying cause. And so what I hope today brought out is that if you're doing things to feel better and it's not working, potentially here's a new underlying cause. Maybe it's leaky brain. Maybe you've got some neuroinflammation, something going on with your glial cells. So it's another thing that you can go unpack. And this is why it's super important to work with a functionally trained doctor who really goes for the root cause, for like what's really going on there. Because remember, symptoms are just your body's way of going, hey, something is not working here. What's up? Right? And then what's cool is that so many of the things that we do with shifting the diet, right? First, improve the quality of the diet, get out things like processed foods and gluten and dairy, and obviously anything with glyphosates, start adding in lots of non-starchy vegetables, eat from the rainbow, clean, healthy fats, the anti-inflammatory ones, clean protein. You know the drill. You've been around the community. So we first do that. We add in good detoxification strategies. We start making sure we pulled out our food intolerances. We lower our sugar impact. Then you get moving. You move more. You start to walk more, just as activities of daily living. You get your burst training on. You start doing resistance training. You do some calming stuff and get good sleep. So you're doing all that stuff. You're taking your good basic core supplements like my daily essential packs with multivitamin, mineral, antioxidants, fish oils. You make sure you optimize vitamin D. So you're doing all of those good things. Those are the foundation. When you go to see a doc, a functionally medicine doc, they're going to want to make sure you've done all of that stuff, because then they can go in and start to really look at what's going on, what's not working, and make those adjustments. So this is what you want to make sure you're doing first. Deal? All right. Okay, cool. So make sure that you are subscribed to the show, because we're launching all sorts of cool new stuff and you don't want to miss it. And while you're over there, leave a review, because it helps us a ton. We go through all of these, the 1 stars to the 5 stars, and that's how it helps me and the team make some decisions as to what we should be doing. So I super appreciate those, and I'd love to give you a shout out on the next show. All right, see ya.
That's all for this episode of the JJ Virgin Lifestyle Show, which marks another step towards a healthier body and mind. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and we'll talk to you next week.